Hello and welcome back to the Prepared Mind channel. You guys are awesome. That's all there is to it. I have had one hell of a long day. I'm totally exhausted, but I can't stop thinking about prepping, what I need to do, what I want to talk about with you guys. So here I am yet again. Let's get down to it, shall we? So, not this weekend, but the weekend coming next. December 15th, I believe is the date. Saturday, high noon. I'm going to be doing a live broadcast here with you guys on Patreon and Patreon only. Just you guys. So it'll be a little quieter in the fun house. So if you would pass your questions on to Jolene. But what I've got is I get questions all the time from you guys. I wish I had more time. And I have to, have Jolene remind me more. John, don't forget the questions. You can address those. Well, that's what I'm doing tonight. I've got some questions you guys have written, and I've taken some excerpts from those questions, the general concepts, and we'll give them some discussion. I've got three really important ones, so let's get into it. Let's talk about it. I've got one here. It's about precious metals. The question, will they be precious after shit hits the fan? You know, why, when should you buy them, stuff like that. Now remember, this is just my opinion. It's not investment advice. In fact, there's a couple different questions we have to ask ourselves when it comes to precious metals, our lives, shit hitting the fan, you know, what's going on. So one of the comments or questions was, he said, I can't see buying them unless you have everything else covered. And so that is the number one thing I talk about. You don't need to go out and buy a bunch of silver and gold if you don't already have a year's worth of food. If you don't have a way to purify water. If you don't have the proper clothing, a good shelter, a bug-out location, right? You need to have the Maslowian hierarchy met. Food, shelter, water, clothing, medicine, and means of self-defense, right? I put defense down in that tier 1. Without defense in a very dangerous world, you're dead. You can only live so long on food and shelter and water before someone comes up and clubs you over the head like a harp seal, takes all your stuff, and you're done. You need to have self-defense as a prepper. It's just that kind of a world. Now, maybe 4,000 or 5,000 years ago, when we were all running around with sticks with a big rock tied to the end of it, that's all we needed. But no, now you need to commit a good deal more attention to self-defense. Not only in buying it, but also training with it, being proficient, and then understanding defensive tactics. Maybe even understanding some offensive tactics. Because they say the best defense is a good offense. So, yeah, precious metals. The gentleman that shared this comment, he said, hey, you know, I don't see him becoming all that precious or useful until, you know, what? 10, 20, 30 years after shit hits the fan. So what I always kind of think about is, if we have an Armageddon, Mad Max, end of the world apocalypse, you bet. It's going to be a long fucking time before anyone gives a shit about gold and silver. They just aren't. They're not going to care. Why would they care? If everyone's scrounging in the mud, digging for worms to try and eke some sustenance out of the soil, who cares about a piece of shiny metal? I get that perspective. It makes sense. Humans have existed for thousands and thousands of years, and at times, gold and silver were incredibly valuable. And at other times, they weren't worth shit. Who cared? It was only very recently, 600-700 years ago, that coinage once again became popular. From the end of the Roman Empire to this point, the beginning of the Renaissance, coinage just wasn't used, right? Precious metals were weighed out, they were traded, they were considered valuable because there was a memory of gold and silver, but for the most part, it was barter. It was barter town, like from Mad Max Beyond Thunderdome. People won't barter. unless they have something worth bartering, if they have extra. If you've got enough food to last 30 days and it's 29 days until you get food again, you're not going to be willing to trade even that one spare day. Right? Food is critical, water is critical, resources are critical. That's why I say I believe you need to have all of your prepper bases covered 100% before you start considering precious metals. And after you have all those bases covered, you need to cover them again. Do you have enough? Is the shit is the fan scenario in your area, according to your expertise and thinking? Is what you have going to last long enough? It's something that I reassess all the time. It's something we all need to reassess all the time, as well as practice with our preps. Practice. You know, shit hitting the fan in a Mad Max ultimate scenario is just, it is horrifying to consider. It's absolutely horrifying. Could it take 10 years? It could take 100 fucking years. I don't know. But over the last 2 years, and especially the last year, I've started to think that, you know, Mad Max is not the only way it can go. I've never believed it was the only way, but I started thinking more and more, the powers that be, they don't want to totally destroy everything. They wouldn't mind seeing a little shit hitting the fan so they can bring in a new economic, political, military paradigm in which you and I become the neo-feudal serfs and they get to be the new elite masters, the aristocracy, and control and run everything using robot military and autonomous drones. I see that sort of scenario definitely. But there still always has to be some form of currency, some form of wealth, and gold and silver has always been wealth. So if you've got your prepping covered, I say sure, take a look into precious metals. Look at silver, look at gold, see what works for you, what you think you can use as currency, what you think could be accepted as currency, what could be readily traded, bartered. Do you live in an area that if we have a Mad Max, will it work? If you have a shit it's the fan light, will the precious metals you choose, will they be readily accepted? Right? Will rounds work? Will you need sovereign coins or bullion? Right? Will you need Canadian maple leafs? Will you need American silver eagles? Will you need gold? Will it need to be in 1 ounce increments? Right? You need to do some research and a lot of it. For me personally, I believe that if you're going to do it, you're going to want something that everyone, or the most people, or the most authoritative people, were it to become used in bartering and trade and as a form of currency, would recognize what you have, ascribe to it proper value. You don't want to spend $1,000 on something that in shit it's the fan is going to be worth 5 cents. Right? You want it to be something you get now that's worth $20, and when shit hits the fan, it'll get you $100 worth of stuff. So do a little bit of homework. Maple Leafs are cool. American Silver Eagles are cool. Buffalo Rounds are cool. I think they're all cool. It's just what's going to be accepted. So do your homework. Look around. Just remember, right? You've got to have the other things taken care of first. Now, let's move on to another question. Who controls the Fed, and why are they tanking the economy? This is a great question. Who controls the Fed? Well, the person who owns the Fed controls it. Well, who owns the Fed? That would be international banking elites. That really would be the Rothschilds. And there are other banking names, but you know, people just point to the Rothschilds. They're the biggest. They're literally the baddest. They're the biggest pain in the ass. Right? They got their break a couple hundred years ago. When Napoleon was defeated at Waterloo, they got news before everyone else, and they took that information to the stock market of the time, and bet. They bet all the right ways because they had insider information. They had control. Well, now they don't control information as much as they control everything. They do control the information. They control the amount of currency. They control the policy. They control it all. One of the tricks they've used time after time after time in this control scheme that they run is they inflate markets, they get people in debt, and then the markets crash. Puh. Everyone owes the bankers, do they not? So all of that wealth, all of that human effort and ingenuity that goes into creating assets and improving land, the bank gets to buy it back for pennies on the dollar because they control the amount of dollars and who has them. And if they need some extra dollars so they can buy something up, they just print it up. There you go. Have some fiat dollars. Thank you very much. It's a system that has happened time after time after time. And people don't learn. The regular people out here, they have very short memories, if they have any memory at all, historical memory of how this works. In the Great Depression, banks lent out money, the markets crashed, they dried up liquidity, there was no money to be made, there was a lot of inflation, lots of problems, and the banks got farms, the banks got houses, the banks got businesses. They've played this game all the time. Now they create a system that they know is faulty. They direct it. They need it to be prosperous. So people start making a ton of money. Holy shit, they got it right. I'm in the money. I'm in the money. That's what they're singing. I'm kicking ass. Oh, I know everything. Just like all these fucking idiot stock traders on YouTube doing videos talking like they know what the fuck they're doing. How can they not? It's been a fucking bull market. Right? For how long now? Since quantitative easing started, they've been pumping liquidity, cash, into the Wall Street. It does nothing but go up and up and up and up and up and up and up. Everyone thinks they're a fucking genius because nobody's losing until people start losing. Last February, we had a major correction. It was the correction that set the timer for 6 months to 18 months, as I've said, that historically, when you get that correction, you get a crash. We are long, long, long overdue for this crash. Long overdue for this crash. It started. We're now seeing all the hiccups, all the signs. The Fed knows they're in trouble, but they really don't care. You know, they go, well, that's their job. We pay them to care. Yeah, well, a lot of people get paid to do a lot of jobs, and they don't really give a fuck. They do their job, they collect their paycheck, they go home. They enjoy their riches. These bankers don't really give a fuck about America. Because when the shit goes bad, when the fucking hammer drops, and people are losing their minds and losing their houses and losing their lives, these bankers are going to be tucked away in their little bunkers, in their little super duper shipping containers that they've had souped up and buried in the ground. And they're going to wait for all the dust and the tears and the ashes to blow by, and they'll come back out and they'll do it again. What's interesting is that they've done something new this time with the economy. Quantitative easing, it's really not a new thing, but it is unprecedented the amount of debt they've run us in. The world has never been in greater debt. The United States has never been in greater debt. The state governments have never been in greater debt. Individuals, human beings, me and you, have never been in greater debt. Now, if you are continually employed, continually getting raises, continually this and that on the good side, and being given, you see, credit. People aren't buying stuff with cash. They're not making $100,000 and buying that fancy car. They're not making $1 million and buying that fancy house. They're going in debt. They're getting a mortgage. They're getting a loan. It's called credit. Right? I have a credit score. You have a credit score. It's credit. They give everyone lots of credit and say, here, go spend. And it stimulates the fuck out of the economy. And the stock market goes up. And the bank knows that all they got to do is dry that credit up. That's what they're doing right now. They're doing it big time. They call it unwinding. They give it a cute name like that. Unwinding their balance sheet. No, that means they're selling shit back into the market and making the economy choke it down. They're pulling cash out of the system. They're removing liquidity. So there's no money to loan. Whether you got good credit or bad credit, the answer is no. It causes businesses to dry up. It causes commerce to dry up. Someone's not spending money, you go out of business. You go out of business, you're not spending money in other people's businesses. They go out of business. Stock market crash. economic collapse. The banks now get to do what? They get to own everything. Instead of being a homeowner, now you get to be a renter. The bank is going to now rent you your house. I think that they're going to crash the system. They're going to restart it under a new financial paradigm. They're going to try cryptocurrency of some sort of electronic cashless currency. It's not going to work. They're going to have to go to gold backed, precious metal backed. You know, this is a shit it's the fan light scenario, by the way. They're going to have to do that. I think that the rich people, the uber rich, they don't want to destroy the entire world, right? Unless they're absolutely psychopathically screwy, which is a possibility. But I don't, you know, I'm praying that doesn't happen. You know, I'm trying to be ready for all of them, but the bank has no problem letting people get super rich, feeling like they're kicking ass, and they go into all kinds of debt, and then they just pull the rug out from under them. Half the people or more lose their cars or renegotiate terms of debt. They keep everything, but the bank is not going to lose their records. They'll come after you, even if it takes a year or two. Ask people who've been living in houses they didn't make payments on for years. The bank kept track. The bank came and renegotiated and said, you owe us all this money. And they got they're still getting their money. They will make us debt slaves. You see, that's what they want. Debt slaves. So that's who controls the Fed. That's why they are tanking the economy. The system is really designed to go up and down constantly. Up and down constantly. Sometimes the recessions are better, sometimes they're worse. This time they're making it far, far, far worse because it was incredibly bad in 2008, but they don't have or didn't have at that time. In my opinion, they didn't have a replacement system. The what comes next. Right? If they had let it crash, yeah, martial law, blood in the streets, just like Hank Paulson, Secretary of the Treasury, said. So they pumped a bunch of what? Debt. That is promises of you and me to pay them forever money back. On money they didn't fucking loan. They punched some numbers into a computer, electronically transferred around, and said that we owe them now? Fuck, I could do that. The Treasury could do that without the Federal Reserve. We don't need the Federal Reserve to tell the Treasury to print $100 bills, $20 bills, $50 bills, $10 bills, fives, ones. We need them to tell us how many to print and put in circulation. Why don't we just take those cocksuckers out of the Federal Reserve private banking system, make them go to work over at the Treasury and say, instead of doing that job for $10 million or $20 million a year, you're going to do it for us for $100,000 a year, and you're going to like it. That's your job. Do it. We're not going to pay interest back to private foreign banks for loaning us fresh air. There are innumerable books on the Federal Reserve, who was involved, who started it, you know, how they did it, why they did it, where they came from, where are they now, who runs it. There's tons of reference works out there. You know, the names were big names at the time, and now, you know, some of them have just gone by the wayside. But it was all started during the robber baron era here in America, the current system we have. But it's out there. You know, the Fed is this big entity that we can't hold accountable, but they're there. And they want to own and control everything. And they do that by building us up and then destroying us. And then saying we owe them. I don't know for sure, but I hope, I pray, I wish, and I plead to God Almighty that somebody, you know, some president, and we've got one now, some president will have the gumption, the balls, the cojones to tell the Federal Reserve to go fuck itself. Arrest not the board members, but the owning banks. Put them out of business, and we can run this ourselves. If you want to see something really interesting, go read about colonial script. It was fiat money. It was loaned with zero interest. It was created without any foreign banks. It was created by the colonial colonies or states, if you will. And they had a marvelous system that was very productive. It created currency, which allowed people to engage in commerce. make a profit, expand, produce more, and they controlled their growth. They controlled their economy by controlling the amount of currency without interest, without debt. It's a marvelous system. Of course, it was attacked by the banks. Counterfeit currency was introduced by foreign banks to destroy it. Anyways, there it is. Enough on that. Beating that horse pretty good. Lastly, I'm going to give Bug Out Bubba some credit here by name. The electrical grid. He's a retired steam engineer, and he was officially warned, he claims, and I don't doubt him, because official warnings happen. He was followed and officially warned to STFU, shut the fuck up, talking about the electrical grid, the power grid. And I've never had anyone tell me to STFU about the power grid. But it is a massive Achilles heel. It is why I recommend strongly that you have batteries, that you have solar power. And I don't mean covering your house in solar panels. I'm talking about just having some portable solar panels you can put out that can charge 12-volt batteries or run through an inverter and run small appliances, like a miniature refrigerator, charging your radios, charging batteries for lights, the simple things. Because when shit hits the fan, you are not going to have the stereo blaring, rocking the house. If you do, you're going to be asking for trouble. But the power grid, it is one of those things that has been attacked. It has been attacked. It's easy to bring power down in a city. It's easy to bring power down in a neighborhood. It's easy to take out entire quadrants of the grid because there are transmission corridors and they can be brought down. They can be attacked by terrorists. And it's my opinion that terrorists are the people who do these sorts of things. You take a big pile of chains, right, and you throw it up and over power lines in your neighborhood. You have it well grounded, and it will arc everything out and cause all kinds of havoc. It'll pop their breakers. It'll fuck the system up. If you know what a substation is, it's an area. You'll see them. When you see them, they're just ugly as fuck. They're usually behind chain link fences. Usually the chain link fences have barbed wire at the top. But power grids or not substations, well, substations, transformer stations, where they step power up and down and move it around, depending on the requirements. They've got big transformers, which are big tanks or cans, and they're full of oil and coils and electrical goodies. All you have to do is shoot them with a high-powered rifle. The oil drains out of them, the switching and material inside either shorts out or grounds out, or take a pick of terms, right? This was done over in San Jose, I think 4 or 5 years ago. A bunch of people shot up a substation and took power out in a big section of the city. Now, if that happens here and there, it's not as big a deal. People in smaller areas can lose their power. In a few days, the local utility or the regional utility can replace that equipment. But if it were to happen in a coordinated effort, they could do what? They could bring down the entire Bay Area. They could bring down the entire greater Atlanta area or Chicago area or New York. Because there's not redundant power supply. If you were to take out the major Western Area Power Association corridor coming down from Canada that cuts through Idaho and then Northern California and then all the way down, which brings all of that beautiful hydroelectric power out of Canada, if you were to put demolition charges at the base of a bunch of transmission corridor towers and blow them and snap all those lines, they can't say, oh yeah, no problem, we'll just use that other transmission cord. There isn't enough. That's the point. There isn't enough. There are not alternative or secondary transmission corridors. The area I'm in has a little bit of a backup, which I'm very proud to say took some effort, but I'll say we got it in. Right? And that is cogen plants in the area can serve small areas. But for most of the United States, certainly in urban areas, they don't have that sort of deal. I know in like South Sacramento, down by Power Inn, they had a natural gas-fired turbine. I think it was under 20 megawatts. That could probably supply that energy, but it would take some fancy switchgear and activity. You know, there's small areas that could survive one of these major attacks. But for the most part, it would make the whole nation deep, dark, quiet. No power. It is a huge Achilles heel. We could also be hit with a cyber attack to the power grid. It's very, very vulnerable that way. They claim it's not. They do tests, and I know they do this, and they're very smart people, very dedicated people that are out there that have firewalls, that have computer programs, that have limited access, but they're not perfect. They're not invulnerable on the computer side. They are protected. They're not guarded. Our system, this is the deal, is our infrastructure in this nation is so big, so spread out like Tularosa. It's so spread out that it can't be guarded. You're like, well, where were the police? Well, they were doing something else. You can't have every bridge guarded, every food plant, every water sanitation plant. They can't all be guarded. You can't guard every single substation, every single power station, every single transmission corridor can't be patrolled by the military. The country's too big, it's too vast, there's too much here. And you can't just pay people to stand around watching something. We got enough of that shit going on already. But that's what they'd have to do. It'd be easy to take it out. I agree with Bubba. Yeah, that is a huge weakness of ours. And without power, what happens? Without electricity, we lose refrigeration. I don't just mean in your house. I mean at the food processing plants. And they could have backup generators. Typically, you have 1 to 5 days worth of fuel on site. Oh, you can just get more fuel. No, you can't. Because what does it take to power the fueling stations? Electricity. How are they going to pay for? How are they going to keep track of? Who has what, took what, and to where? Everyone does everything computerized now. Without electricity, there's no computers. Without computers, they don't know. Right? It's logistics. Logistics is incredibly complex. They have powerful computing systems that handle logistics. And just getting fuel around requires electricity and one hell of a good logistics system. Not to mention a currency system, which is all electronic now. Transferring funds from account to account to pay for the fuel that goes to the factories, that goes to the fuel stations. And even if they could get fuel to your fuel station, if there's no electricity, which means no computers, which means no internet, how the hell are you going to buy anything? Because you don't have any cash. Because you go to the bank, number one, they don't have cash. Number two, their computers are down, and they can't tell you how much you have in your account. So even if you could get fuel at the fuel station, there's no way they could ring you up unless you had cash. It's a good idea to have a little cash around as a prepper. A couple of $100, maybe a couple $1,000, to maybe pay for some items if we have this sort of event happen. You see, shitting the fan isn't a fucking picnic or a parade or a camp-out session. But if you go on a picnic, bring some of your prepping stuff. Right? If you go on a camp-out, make it a prepping camp-out. Practice with it. See what it's like, what it feels like. And then try and realize, man, this sucks. This is hard. Because compared to all this great electricity, which we're talking about being crashed by a bunch of terrorist activity. And we have enemies, foreign and domestic. Foreign and domestic. Right? You'll realize that you've got it really good as a prepper and you're not happy. You're going to find problems with your system, so that's why you need to practice. Practice prepping as well as, owning the prepper items. But if you are not happy, if you're a little uncomfortable, if you're upset, if you're worried, if you have fear, if you have anger, imagine people that aren't preppers out there, that way. They don't have the food. They don't have the water. They don't have the shelter and clothing. They don't have the means of self-defense. They don't have a plan for what could happen. But you do, because chance favors the prepared mind. So I'm going to ask you, is yours? Is yours? It's up to you. Whether you think we're going to get a shit at the fan light, whether you think we're going to get the Armageddon style Mad Max, or possibly both, or a little bit of one and a lot of the other, right? You have to be responsible for you. I'm the expert in my world. You're the expert in your world. But these were great questions. I want to thank you guys for them. And again, December 15th, Saturday, high noon Pacific Standard Time. I'm going to be live, and I think I've got a couple surprises for you guys that you're going to like. You'll throw some questions out. We'll bat them back, answer style, bring out some awesome perspectives and answers to your questions, and we'll have a good old time. So until tomorrow, you guys be cool. Tomorrow will be the weekly wrap-up. But until then, be careful and watch the stock market. Wailing and gnashing of teeth at all those people electronically transferring all their hard work and effort right into the investment bankers in Wall Street. What a great idea that was, huh? Woo! I hope that you aren't fully invested 100% in Wall Street with all of your accumulated wealth. I really hope you're not. I hope you've got wealth in other areas. Because these people are, just like the Federal Reserve, they're getting ready to make the biggest wealth transfer in the history of known civilization. You guys be cool. Godspeed. Semper Fi.